Hey everybody, it's Mike. Today is Saturday, January 16th, and I want to respond. I'm doing this because I got this really good email, and I'm going to respond to that. But then, I figure since I'm doing this, I'm going to talk about some other stuff. So, this isn't like a full presentation, but I think these are fun, I guess. I don't know. So, the last video I made, the one about where I brought up the idea of time travel, that struck a nerve for a bunch of people. Like not like in a gentle way. Like it got a reaction. It got a lot of response from a lot of people. I'm saying that based upon the number of messages I got from people and just kind of like the quality of the tone of it. And so there's one story in particular which was friggin' awesome. And I want to share it. I'm just going to paraphrase it. Because I asked the guy if I could share it, and he didn't respond back to me. And I don't know, I get impatient, so I'm just going to go and tell you the story as opposed to read it verbatim. But anyways, this guy, he says he heard that time travel video and he wanted to share his story. And so it begins with him telling about his background, his childhood. It's probably I think he said he was 55, 60-year-old man. And he described his childhood of being that of what's kind of known as childhood emotional neglect. Often one or both parents, with who are psychologically, not ideal for raising children, or the psychological frame, which would be difficult for a human being to get what they need to really become emotionally grounded. Our whole culture, generation after generation after generation, since the 1945, has really been bred for each generation to create more of this. But so this guy's telling the story. His parents are narcissists and maybe alcoholics. I don't know, but dysfunctional, but not dysfunctional necessarily physical beatings or It wasn't like this. This is purely an emotionally, which is often the wounds are just as deep and they're harder to see, I suppose, of not getting what a human being needs from having growing up in a psychological, in a psychologically complex environment. So, and he told the story how he would lie in bed. He can remember this. He said when he was a young child, he would lie in bed just filled with anxiety and couldn't sleep. And he would have these visions of when he would both have his eyes open and closed, and he could see these visions of some man's face. And, I'm telling you this, and I'm is this a movie? Did someone goof me? But regardless, I think it's an awesome story. So he sees this, just the idea of it, because I'm so excited by it. He sees the vision of this guy's face, and, it's kind of cloudy or what have you. And then, his life, it unfolded like you would imagine, like most people's lives would unfolded who have come from such an environment, and seeing that in various ways and to various degrees of unhealthy relationships, self-destructive relationships or behaviors running from responsibility, all this sort of stuff. And to various degrees, that is the natural, or one of the natural predictive pathways of a human being who did not have the environment to be emotionally at ease. The most important thing to a child, particularly those first 7 years of life, is a sense of predictability and comfort, so that emotional body, psychological body, however you want to envision it, it can unfold. It can unfold safely, because if it doesn't unfold safely, part of it recoils, and that creates this psychological trauma loop of expressing life in a certain way. That's why they're predictable models, because they're oh, you can do this and you do that. The human being is or human psyche especially, is the most studied of all things on earth. So So that shows itself in behaviors of a child who never felt comfortable, and growing up, like really we develop a lot of our personality, or when we're 3 to 5, we develop some really, really specific ways within our personality, and it shows how we meet life, and how did we meet it? What were we learned? What do we learn to do? And if you're not safe from that mentality, like, you create all sorts of different ways of getting your needs met, and then that, depending upon how you want to look at it, like, it continues to show itself within the life of the individual, either consciously, unconsciously, but that becomes worked into the operating script of someone's life. And that's why I say, like, when culture was, particularly the families, when they started breaking down the families, like, 1945, you go and you psychologically traumatize all these men, but then also the women, and like everything, and then they send them back home. They're like, welcome, you're on a cul-de-sac. Welcome to suburban life. That's when it started changing. And we started going through all of the iterations of cultural norms and technology changes. And like, each generation, there was less and less security for children. So each generation, coupled with all this sort of stuff, is becoming more and more emotionally weak. And so, like, we're all born into that. We all have that. Like, to expect that that's not in your life or your experience is foolish. If it was something which was not that managed, which was like, not horrific, definitely, we're here to lift each other up. So anyway, this is what that guy's story was. And he's telling me these stories. And so, about 10 years ago, he went and did a 2-week stay at an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. And he said, like, it was good and all, but like, not really life changing. And then, but it was some years later that he called it a life coach, someone who really helped him map his gave him a map for the psychological landscape, and things started to make sense, and he began to recognize, like, just the way that we work so that we can grow. This is true for all of us. Like life coach, I think, is kind of like a goofy term, but it's a catch-all phrase right now for anyone who really works within, like, the deeper part of, like, what it is to be human, but, they don't have, like, the cultural credentials to call themselves a psychologist or something, but they're more than a psychologist, but they're dealing on a deeper level. They share something, psyche being like doctors of the soul. That they are. They're definitely doctors of the soul. Well, some of them are, at least. But that's my guess of the person who worked with who sent me in this email. So anyway, so he started working with a person, and he started, like, recognizing, like, what his behaviors were, and began, just, this is what it is to be a human. This is being a human, in our own stories. We, like, go through stuff, and we meet it, and we, like, grow, and it's like, it's not pretty, but it's beautiful in the same time. And that's true for individuals and families and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, back to our story, right? So he started working with this life coach, and he also was periodically doing ayahuasca and other types of plant ceremonies, and that became, that was worked in with what he was first initiated into in Peru, like, sometime earlier. So one particular weekend, he goes and he is at an ayahuasca retreat. And I want to be 100% honest. Like, there are many, many ways to understanding the depths, and, plant medicine is not required. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not, like, endorsing it, so I'm not also dissuading. I'm just saying, like, I'm a storyteller. And so, like, if you're listening to a story, and you're probably undoubtedly, like, because I'm talking about a universal truth, we're going to hear a universal truth here. It's going to resonate. I just want to be clear, like, you're also the captain of your ship. You make your own decisions about what you think is safe and what's not safe, or what you want to do or not do, or what consequences you're willing to gamble. Life is, it's a wheel of fortune. So, where are we? So, the hero of our story, the protagonist, if you will, is, life is starting to become more clear, and more tools in terms of working with the unprocessed emotional traumas. And so he goes to a ayahuasca retreat. I don't think this one was in Peru. And by this time, he's real experienced with like, you know, those inner states of like holding space, of like not getting lost in kind of like the experience with it, but to have some sort of like purpose and intention, and hold that intention throughout like his deep plant medicine experience. And so what he did was he brought a picture of himself, you know, it was a 9x6 picture of himself as a young boy, and he would look at it and he would just like beam love. So in this, like whatever state, however it is you understand what like things like ayahuasca are, you know, he's in that level of consciousness and experience with the focus of saying, I am beaming love to this version of me who's getting what he never got. I'm giving it to him. So, you know, if you're familiar with like any type of inner work, you know, like this is a tried and true technique. It's tried and true because this is how we work, or this is one of the ways we work, like, you know, through stories and like tapping in. And so, so he says that, you know, he went through that experience and was like rich and what have you. And then, you know, after the third day of, I guess he was at like a retreat center, the third time he sat in ceremony again, he's like brushing his teeth in front of, you know, a mirror, and just kind of like, he's in the space, he's still in the medicine. And, suddenly he realized that face, like literally, like I'm not being metaphorical, like literally that face which he saw when he was a young boy, when he was lying on those beds. And the only thing that he found reassuring, the only thing that he found comforting in the whole wide world was that face. And he realized that was his own 52-year-old face. And so he shared with me, he's like, you know, that's time travel. And oh God, you know, I mean, that tickles me. Like, I like that type of story. And you know, if you're human, you probably do as well. But also, like, you know, it's a fantastic story. But I want to, I'm going to bring it back to some more weirdness. And that was a great story, and I loved it. I hope you enjoyed the ride. And you know who, thank you for sharing that story. So, but now I want to go over here. This is something which I made. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, but we're going to tie it in. You know, I've been working on a lot of things lately, and me deciding what I want to do with my time and my energy, with what's coming, you know, that has been heavy in my mind. And so, it was a time of stillness, and it's also a time of like, you know, also inspiration. So, you know, I've been making some stuff, and I'll share what I'm making. And so that's what I want to share. Right here. All right, check this out. So, this here is I'll move that there. I'll put me back in here so you can see that. So this here is a map of reality, or 3-tiered map of reality. And right here is what you know I call the matrix, or what's been called the matrix. Everyone called it the matrix, but the matrix, and what I call 4D consciousness. It's like culture, history, technique, reality, school reality, like all the stuff which you know is the matrix. Like that's the matrix. It's 4D. It's based upon dominating, disharmony, pay to exist. These are all examples of what life is like in this level. And there's like a lot of people who live here. And then we got this right here. This right here. This is the simulation. This is what I'm calling the simulation. And this is the Maya illusion. I don't know if it's like a computer simulation, but it's not real. Like it's a simulation in the fact that other cultures have and times have referred to like corporeal reality as being an illusion. Feels real. Feels just as real as being inside here. Remember, this all feels real. But here, this is, you know, linear time, earth dependent, material reality, all that sort of stuff. And it feels real. It feels just as real as this. And, you know, this is completely artificial. This is whatever this is, but this is totally artificial. There's a transition going from here to there and here to there. And it's usually, you know, this is not, is hard of a demarcation is this image lets out. And then we've got this, like the greater reality, which the simulation exists in, and, you know, And so that is, time travel and synchronicity and quantum physics. But this is just as harmonious as this. Like these two are at least like, these are in harmony with each other. This is a higher octave. This is just something totally different, but it fits with him. And this here and this here, like it has different ways of like touching. Like when you go from this to this, when you leave from matrix to here, like they all have these different ways of relating. Like it's not so simple, so cut and dry, like on or off, like, oh, I'm in the matrix. Oh, I'm in the simulation. Oh, I'm greater reality. But it's a dance. And as we heard in that last story, it really was an example of time travel. That is time travel. And it's been put out there a lot. It's been put out like particularly with like consciousness sort of stories. And this is the thing which is interesting about consciousness, particularly these consciousness like theories and teachings is, you got to ask yourself, like, when is it metaphor and when is it literal? Like, how far does it go? How far is this literal? And how far is this, just a parable so that you can understand a story? Okay. And I think that's part of the process. And so what we saw right here was like, this was time travel. It was time travel on a certain level of like, of psychicness, of like psychic development and wisdom development. But it's not exactly the type of time travel which I was kind of hinting at in that last video of like literally like existing in such a way that your life, your day-to-day experience is like you are not part of the simulation. You're like literally able to go out, like, oh, this is the simulation, I could come back in. Just like Matrix, just like someone who's like, oh, I understand how like any of these social media platforms work in terms of like what they're doing and how I can interact with it and like how I can go in and out. Like there are people who still go in the matrix and go out of the matrix. Some people live entirely in the simulation. Some people, like, it's all this different bleed over. And so, we're seeing a little bit of a bleed over right here of like the psyche bleed over of time travel. And I think that is just like a hint to add, and it's a closer example, a more tangible example of, an actual expression of reality, in which, like, when we think of time travel, again, it's positioned to us that you need like special equipment. Like, everything you know about time travel has been given to you by, the Fabian Society or like Hollywood, whatever this organization is. And this is what's so important about these Christopher Nolan films, is because he hints at it. He's always hinting at it that we are it. So that's really kind of interesting. And it's a story as well. But nonetheless, we just heard one type of time travel from here to here, but I think there's more and more. And by time travel, it's a different way of being, and it is so fundamentally different. But how we get there is by recognizing like the stories like that guy just said, and giving it a weight, and looking for them in our eyes, and by seeing them as meaningful and real and significant to the journey. Because what we're doing is we're progressing forward. If you go and you look at any sort of movement, if you break it down to a small enough segment of time, you're going to begin to see that's just like different small movements. And so when you realize that's how change works, it works in small jumps. Like, so many of us are expecting something huge, but if you haven't seen something huge, well, you're going to be working on something small. So all of this is like a setup for what I'm working on right now. So let me see. Do I still got this? I got to come back to this. So this is it. This is a very, very interesting. This is an interesting map of what we're calling being insane. Like, being insane is really, we're defining it as just relative to how close it is to the majority of mainstream thinking. Insanity has nothing to do with like actual or factual. And so as one begins to go further and further, there's like, one of the things you've been told to be concerned with is, becoming insane. And there's probably a truth There's probably a truth to that. But like, we're pushing that edge. I'm saying all of this like in total humor, But it's like, remember this? We're talking last week about the SATOR square. And we know that in Christopher Nolan's film, whatever that is, whatever Hollywood is. And so we're playing with this. This is our glass bead game. We know that Christopher Nolan, is he hinting? Someone's hinting something to us, and he's talking about like, at least in this instance, in this movie, it has to do with time travel, and this here has something to do with time travel, and it is my ARG, if you will, that everything can be done with the right mind, attitude, inner posture. It's not just attitude and perspective, it's more than that. But nonetheless, like, it is, for those who are skilled, it is something which they don't need to go out and buy something. They don't have to mine the earth. They don't have to go to the furthest stretches of reality to find a special mineral. So that's all friggin' bullshit. But there is like kind of, they're showing you like, but this is what's possible. So okay, so I told you all this stuff about like, move the small incremental changes. And so we can look at technology right now, and I've said this many times before, but I'm still figuring out like how we work with it. Is like, how is it that we step away from this computer and from smartphones and from all of the technology which has connected us and expanded our understanding of reality, and how do we get the same sort of benefit, but without having to rely on someone else's design, because that's what's happening right now or that's my ARG. I'm not claiming this is how it is. I'm just playing, this is how the game is being played. I want to go and have like those experiences, being able to have the same behaviors, but not have to go and like, have to pay to have access, not to have something which was manufactured by mining the earth and like plastics and robots, like, no, but be able to do that. So I'm moving it forward. So it's like, that begins as an idea. That begins with me as an individual saying, you know what? I think there's another fucking reality. And in that reality, it would look like this. And it's not so far-fetched. How do I know? Is because because I know that this does exist. And if this can exist in reality, well, then it can be other expressions, because I have seen that with my own eyes, how archetypes and symbols work. So that being said, the question is, how would I build my smartphone time travel machine? What materials would use? How expensive? And so the conclusion is like, I'd make it with stuff which is readily available to me, which doesn't cost no money, very little money, and has personal meaning, where I know what it is. All right. So I'm building and this is a work in progress. This is a work in progress, right? I have not shown you it yet. And this is not what it's going to look like, but you're going to see it like, in its early stages. But I am building your fifth dimensional time travel smartphone device. Okay. Let's see. Let's go here. Right? Look at this. Look at this. So the black letters, and so let me go and show you everything. So first off, this stone is really friggin' heavy, and it's flat. You see how flat it is, and it's even, and it's dense, it's heavy. So if you recall the video where I was in like those strange stones, I got this that day that I recorded it. I found in between two stones this like piece of stone, and it took me a while of like kind of kicking it with my toe, but I got it out. All the other stones are rounded. Why this is flat? Like obviously if it's a big enough circle, it'll be flat at some point. But this is what I got. So it's that stone. So that's where it's beginning. It's got this, it's unusually heavy. It's got this waxy feel to it. It's paramagnetic, like there's a repulsion, like when you put a magnet on it, which kind of pushes it away. So we've got that. And then I've put in this, thanks, tenant. I'm going to go and play with this. I'm going to play with this with my intention. This is how the inner world meets the outer world. And I made my SATOR square. And I made it out of two types of sand. The black sand, let's see, is actually, 2 layers of ash or volcanic ash from Hawaii, and then the top layer is shungite. You know, if you know that you're supposed to put like shungite in your water, but you want to go and purify it first. So you go and you put it like and you steam some water, and like, you know, if you're going to steam something. And I did that. I've done this twice. Twice I've done the same thing. Where I've forgotten about it, like maybe for too long, and I came and I turned it off, and it broke like a big chunk of shungite into like small powdery form. So I didn't do that on purpose, but you know, I got that and I saved that material, and so that's the material I use. This is shungite on top of volcanic ash, on top of sand from the mid-Atlantic, you know, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware sort of places. And it's on, you know, perfectly centered on the square. And then we have here, you see these glass pieces? I just started putting them in. So I've got 14 here. I'm going to do more here. And I'm going to fill it all in. And it's going to be smooth on, at least this will be on the same plane. But this here it's from my friend Asa. Asa is a sound healer. I'm going to pause for a moment and show you a picture of Asa. All right, I ran away for a sec because I wanted to go get a picture of Asa. He just sent me a picture. So this is Asa. So you see this right here? This is my friend Asa. And Asa is he's a gifted sound healer. Obviously, by looking at this picture, you know, with his way with the horse, it's not just limited to sound, which he works with. But nonetheless, where are we? This here, all of this glass looking is crystal. It's from one of Asa's crystal sound healing bowls, which broke. And he gave me the pieces of crystal many, many years ago because he's like, you know, he didn't want it to break, but it broke. And so he recognized the significance and like everything that was held within the crystals. I mean, that's what a crystalline molecule does. You know, it's perfect and it holds, you know, that's why it holds a shape, it holds a quality. And so it holds all of that energy, which, you know, whatever that is, which Asa works with, like, you know, that's in here. So I've got like more, which I'm going to place on this side. And so when this is done, this is like literally like, you know, it's my smartphone. And like, humor me. Like, I mean, that's the thing. This is the ARG. It's like, you know, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go and be on this, on this line, you know, on this graph? It's like, you know, there's a part of me which is approaching this with 100% like authentic desire, more than desire, like belief. Like, this is what it would be like if you were going to go and make something. Like, you know, if everything which I'm suggesting is a true and actual expression of how the way the world works, like, how would it happen? Like, I haven't seen anything magically appear, but I can see it and I know how things show up. So I'm like, well, okay, well, if I was going to go and build something which was able to give me the ability to do the same thing as I'm able to first experience with the smartphone, I'm like, well, this is what it would look like according to me. And so it's like I buy into it and I play with it. And at the very least, I know that I'm moving forward. At the very least, it's like, this is a move forward. This is a move forward. This is a move forward. Like, this becomes more real. And so, like, you know, this is the ARG. And it's like, you're like, well, no, I'm not going to play that ARG. I'm like, well, what ARG are you going to play? You're going to play? Because that's what this game of consciousness is about. So let me go back to, we'll go say goodbye to Asa one last time. I miss you, Asa. So my friend who sent the email, the very last thing he asked me about this. He was like, hey, I saw you mentioned this thing called the Field Project at the end of your video. Is it something you recommend? And so, you know, if you haven't figured out, like, I'm not in the business of making recommendations. I'm in the business of sharing information and encouraging people to go and do their own stuff. But that being said, I love to give recommendations. You know, like, that's what it is. I like to tell my story. This is what I think has been interesting. So it's like, you know, that's my approach to this. So the Field Project. I got to tell you about how this came into my life. So this was about 5 years ago. I just split up with my family, with the woman who I'd been married to for over a decade, to my two children, but even more so, it was like to the life I lived. Like that was the thing. Going into divorce, I was like prepared to lose my wife, but I was not prepared to lose my life. Like everything changed, and looking back in hindsight, that was the preparation for where I am today, and particularly this particular time right now where everything is changing. But nonetheless, like back to my story. So like that happened in May, and I lived in an apartment in Lancaster City for a couple months, and then in August I moved into a house in Wilmington, Delaware. It's the stars aligned for me, and I found myself living in this house at like a really, really like emotionally low point in my life. Confused, like literally the rug had been pulled out from underneath me. And but I was growing immensely, like so many things were happening, but it's like so I'm at this house in Wilmington, and the woman whose house it was, and there's so many friggin' stories about like about the house and living in Wilmington. Like, you ever heard me talk about the DuPonts in Wilmington? It all comes from this experience. And so there was this was a house which was just filled with very, very like unusual artifacts. The woman whose house it was immensely curious and immensely competent. Like, whatever captured her attention and tend to be like unique things. She was like she really, really knew it. But then also like totally out there, like nuts in the best way. And so one day I find in one of her bookshelves, I see this case, this CD case, and it's sealed. It's called the Field Center. And like it's nice, like fancy wrapping or packaging, and it was like I don't know what the language was, but it was like a new consciousness, blah blah blah. Like it was hitting some of my buzzwords. I'm like, wow. So I went and I asked Sarah. I'm like, so what is this? She's like, I don't know what that is. I've never seen that before. I'm like, what do you mean you've never seen that before? She's like, I've never seen that before. And I'm like, I found this right here. She's like, it's very possible that I bought it or someone gave it to me years ago, but it registered so low in my consciousness that to me I've never seen that before. She's like, must be for you. So I'm like, all right, and I agree. I'm like, this must be for me. This is how the game would work if we're folding back stories or information to ourselves. And so I listened to the Field Center, and the Field Center is kind of like it's any of these like mental reprogramming things, like whether it's like Tony Robbins or whether it's quantum jumping, if anyone remembers what that was, Silva mind control, Monroe Institute, all of these things that are like, where you're listening to it and it's talking about consciousness and working your mind, like it's in that realm, but it's different. I've listened to a whole bunch of things over at least, 30, 40 years. I've listened to a lot of stuff. I've got a good library to compare it to. So I go and and I compare it to it. I know that like this stuff is good. I heard things I have not heard before, and things which I probably would not appreciate the subtlety of unless I've like listened to so many other things. That being said, like there's some stuff I didn't agree with. I'm like, this is a limited hangout. Like I'm like, if everything else you're saying is true, then why are you talking about this? And there's maybe that has to be built in. I don't know, but I also think that I'm comfortable to receive information from any source and know that I can extract truth that makes sense to me. So that means like the other stuff I'm able to let go by and not throw baby out with the bathwater. So it's like I did that, and if you're interested in the Field Center or the Field Project, it's not called the Field Project. I don't even know if it's the same thing which I'm listening to, like because it's got a different name. But that was my thoughts. I have listened to it. I've listened to it as much, if not more than anything. Probably the only other, the people that I've personally listened to the most, I'm going to listen to this again and again. I used to do a lot of that, 15 years ago, of like people who I just like listening to. I would just like play it again and again and again. But it was like, the early stuff of Neil Kramer, I can still picture it. Like I have a CD of it, and I remember like uploading it. It was just a series of essays which he wrote, and that was really meaningful. But I listened to that over and over again. I listened to a lot of John Rappaport stuff. John Rappaport is had a huge influence on the shaping of my mind, for whatever that's worth. But this did as well. And that's all I'd say. And and I think that a lot of what I'm talking about now, and particularly as it relates to reality, is influenced probably by all three of those, in different levels. Like Neil Kramer was the first I listened to, and then John Rappaport, and then I found this thing, the third, in terms of order of of how I received it. And what it did is it prepares, it gives you a model for almost like calisthenics, a way of keeping track of your inner process. So that's what I want to say about that. It's about a 36-minute tape. I say that stuff all the time, like videotape. There's a bleed through, which is bizarre, but I'm working on a couple really interesting presentations, which I'm excited to share, dealing with Rosicrucians, specifically like new information to share as it relates to the Invisible College on the Susquehanna River, and I am watching. I'll complete that on the Susquehanna River in the 40th parallel, like. That story, if you've seen Secret on the Susquehanna, there's the fourth college has been found. And I haven't mentioned anything about this yet, but that's coming up. But then there's also I'm rewatching Interstellar. I talked about Tenet before, and I'm watching Interstellar, and there's some things which, watching it now, are really kind of jaw dropping, and it plays into everything which we're talking about, from the ARGs of life, and pop culture and communicating with ourselves and time travel and all this sort of stuff. So I'm excited to go and put that together in a presentation form. So that's it. I hope you guys are enjoying your weekend. Talk to you the next time, I suppose.